The bridge of the Veltharion was a sanctuary of luminescent calm, its organic walls pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins that mirrored the steady rhythm of the ship's core. Captain Zarvoth stood in the center, his tall, sinewy form poised like a coiled spring. His amber eyes glowed faintly under the dim light as he focused on the holographic display before him. The data pulsing across it made little sense, and that disturbed him more than anything. "Captain, the anomaly persists," reported Valorn, the ship's sensor officer, his voice trembling. Valorn's bioluminescent crest flickered erratically, a physical manifestation of his unease. "What do you mean, persist?" Zarvoth asked, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "It is unlike any celestial body or ship we've encountered. The energy signature is overwhelming." Valorn hesitated, glancing at the captain. "It doesn't conform to any known patterns." Zarvoth studied the hologram. The object in question, if it could even be called that, was a void in the map of space itself, a black obelisk surrounded by faint, sporadic energy emissions. No radiation bursts, no gravitational anomalies, no movement. It simply was. "Can it be a dormant relic?" suggested Adros, the tactical officer. His voice carried a sharper edge, his posture rigid. Unlike Valorn, Adros saw fear as a liability. "Unlikely," Zarvoth replied, though the idea lingered in his mind. The Zerithian collective had encountered ancient ruins before, remnants of civilizations that had burned themselves out in their own ambition. But those artifacts, while formidable, never exuded the raw potential for destruction this anomaly hinted at. The Zerithians were explorers, not conquerors. Their society prized harmony and collective understanding above all else. Yet, as the bridge crew watched the hologram, there was a shared, unspoken acknowledgement. This was no relic, no harmless remnant. "It is not dormant," Zarvoth said finally. "Valorn, deploy a probe. I want visuals and a detailed energy profile." Valorn nodded, his crest still flickering. Within moments, the Veltharion's probe launched a sleek, silver dart propelled silently into the void. The crew watched in tense silence as it approached the anomaly. As the probe neared, the holographic display shifted, constructing a live feed of the object. The bridge was bathed in ghostly light as the image resolved. A gargantuan construct of angular metal, bristling with weapons and radiating an aura of menace. Its hull was painted in the deep black of space, broken only by streaks of red glowing faintly like embers in a dying fire. The silence in the room became oppressive. Valorn's voice finally broke it. "It's the warship." Zarvoth's gaze hardened. A warship of the scale was beyond anything in Zerithian understanding. The collective had encountered other species, some aggressive, some curious, but none capable of constructing something so singularly destructive. "Are there life forms aboard?" Zarvoth asked. Valorn hesitated before replying. "Unknown. The hull is too dense for our scans to penetrate. The energy readings suggest immense power reserves, enough to sustain a fleet." Adros stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the display. "If it's a warship, it's a threat. We should prepare our defenses." "Against what?" Zarvoth shot back, his tone sharp. "We do not know their intent." "Intent?" Adros barked. "That thing is a weapon. What peaceful purpose could it possibly serve?" Zarvoth raised a hand, silencing him. "We do not act out of fear." "Not yet." The probe sent another transmission, this time capturing the first signs of movement. The warship's surface shimmered, and its angular frame shifted slightly, as if waking from slumber. A deep, resonant hum echoed through the Veltharian systems, disrupting the telepathic link that united the crew. The hum grew louder, almost sentient in its intensity, as if probing the Zerithians' collective consciousness. Zarvoth's head throbbed with the effort of maintaining focus. "What is it doing?" Valorn gripped his console. I don't know. It's interfering with our systems. A brilliant flash erupted from the warship, and the probe was gone, vaporized in an instant. A sharp intake of breath swept through the bridge. Adros slammed his fist onto the console. That was a warning, Adros said coldly. We need to act now, Captain. Zarvoth remained silent, his mind racing. The destruction of the probe was an unmistakable message, but its intent was unclear. Was this a hostile act or a precautionary measure? Valorn, attempt to establish communication, Zarvoth ordered. Valorn hesitated but obeyed, sending out a broad-spectrum telepathic signal. The warship's hum grew louder, filling the bridge with a palpable sense of dread. Zarvoth clenched his fists, forcing himself to remain calm. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, the warship emitted a signal of its own. It was not telepathic, but a powerful burst of sound and light, incomprehensible to the Zerithians. The bridge crew flinched, their crests dimming in unison. What is it saying? Valorn whispered. It's not a language, Zarvoth replied. It's a warning. The warship began to move, its massive frame gliding toward the Veltharian with an unrelenting purpose. Zarvoth's stomach twisted. Whatever the species was, they did not intend to negotiate. Captain, Adros said, his voice low and steady. If we do not act now, we will not have another chance. Zarvoth looked around the bridge. His crew's fear was palpable, their unity strained under the weight of the unknown. He had to make a decision, not just for his ship, but for his people. Charge the shields, Zarvoth ordered. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. The bridge came alive with activity, but the tension remained. As the human warship loomed closer, Zarvoth felt the first stirrings of doubt. Could the Zerithians survive this encounter? The warship's hum became deafening, a soundless roar that resonated in Zarvoth's chest. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. May the collective guide us, he whispered. The Veltharian braced itself as the alien warship drew near, its intention still shrouded in shadow. The ISS Retribution was an imposing sight, a marvel of human engineering forged in the fires of necessity and ambition. It moved through the void like a predator, its hull dark as obsidian, broken only by faint red accents that pulse like veins of molten lava. Within its labyrinthine halls, the air was thick with purpose and unspoken tension. Commander Marcus Hale stood on the command deck, his gaze fixed on the tactical display projected before him. The holographic map rendered the region in stunning detail, every celestial object meticulously catalogued. Yet his attention was drawn to one anomaly, an unidentified vessel, sleek and alien, lingering in a sector marked as uncharted. Range to target? Hale's voice was steady, though his sharp green eyes betrayed his focus. 80,000 kilometers in closing, sir, replied Lieutenant Reed, a younger officer with a crisp, no-nonsense demeanor. Hale nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. The Retribution had been dispatched to secure humanity's expansion into the sector, a mission that carried an unspoken mandate: ensure no unforeseen threats jeopardize the colonies. The unidentified ship was an unexpected variable, and Hale didn't like variables. What do we know about it? Hale asked. Preliminary scans show a small crew and an advanced energy matrix, said Drayton, the ship's science officer. His analytical tone carried a hint of unease. Their power levels don't match anything we've seen before. It's elegant, almost organic. Elegant doesn't mean harmless, Hale said. And it doesn't explain what they're doing in this sector. There was silence on the deck as Hale's words hung in the air. The crew of the Retribution were professionals, battle-hardened from decades of humanity's struggle to secure its place in a hostile galaxy. Yet there was something about this encounter that felt different. Lieutenant Reed, open a channel, Hale ordered. Yes, sir. Reed's fingers danced across his console. Moments later, the comm system emitted a low hum as it transmitted a universal greeting, short, powerful bursts of data designed to communicate intent without linguistic barriers. No response. "Do they hear us?" Hale asked, his tone edging toward impatience. "They're receiving the signal," Drayton confirmed. "But if they understand it, they're not acknowledging." Hale's jaw tightened. "Keep the channel open. If they're peaceful, they'll respond. If not," he let the sentence trail off, knowing the crew understood the implication. He turned to Colonel Dax Carter, the ship's weapons officer, a grizzled veteran with a perpetual scowl etched into his face. "Colonel, prepare a warning shot. Something to get their attention, without doing too much damage." "Yes, Commander." Carter's voice was a low growl as he barked orders to his team. Hale returned his gaze to the tactical display. The alien vessel remained stationary, its sleek design glinting faintly in the reflected light of a distant star. Its refusal to respond to their greeting only deepened his suspicion. "They're not moving," Hale said. "But they're not retreating either." "What does that tell you, Drayton?" "That they're watching us," Drayton replied. "Evaluating us, just as we're evaluating them, or waiting for an opening," Carter interjected. "Let's not assume the worst," Hale said, though his tone carried little conviction. The warning shot came without ceremony. A pulse of energy streaked through the void, bright and sharp against the darkness. It passed close to the alien vessel, close enough to rattle any shields they might have. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the alien ship emitted a light of its own, a shimmering wave that rippled through space like an aurora. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic, but its purpose was unclear. "What the hell was that?" Carter asked, leaning forward. "Energy disruption," Drayton said, scanning his console. "It's not a weapon, but it's interfering with our systems. Our sensors are struggling to recalibrate." "Commander," Reed said, urgency creeping into his voice, "the alien ship is powering up. I'm detecting a significant energy spike." Hale felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He had faced many challenges in his career. Hostile species, rogue factions, impossible odds, but this felt like the edge of an abyss. "Carter, target their engines," Hale ordered. "If they're preparing to fire, I want them disabled before they get the chance." "Yes, Commander." Carter's hands moved with practiced precision, arming the ship's main cannons. The alien vessel began to move, its sleek form gliding toward the Retribution with an eerie grace. Its energy signature continued to spike, growing brighter on the tactical display. "They're closing the gap," Reed reported. "Maintain course," Hale said, his voice calm despite the tension in the room. "Let's see how far they're willing to go." The Retribution's weapons locked onto the alien ship, the targeting system emitting a faint hum as it calculated firing solutions. The moment stretched, taut and unbearable, as the two ships faced each other in the endless void. Hale's mind raced, weighing the consequences of his next decision. If they fired, they might provoke a war with a species they knew nothing about. But if they hesitated, the Retribution and its crew could be annihilated. "Commander," Drayton said, his voice low, "their energy levels are approaching critical. If they're charging a weapon, we might not survive the first strike." Hale took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving the display. "Carter, fire a disabling shot. Aim for their propulsion systems. Let's make sure they can't reach us before we figure out what we're dealing with." The order was given, and the ship's main cannon roared to life, sending a lance of energy hurtling toward the alien vessel. It struck its mark with precision, enveloping the ship in a blinding explosion of light. When the light faded, the alien vessel remained intact, but it had stopped moving. Its energy levels began to fluctuate wildly, its once elegant form flickering, as if struggling to maintain cohesion. "They're crippled," Carter said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. Hold fire, Hale ordered, his gaze hard. We've made our point. Let's see how they respond. The alien ship drifted in silence, its energy signature dimming. For a moment, it seemed as though the encounter might be over. But then, a new signal appeared on the display, a massive energy buildup emanating from the ship's core. They're not retreating, Drayton said, his voice tight with alarm. Hale clenched his fists. They're retaliating. The tension on the command deck thickened, every eye fixed on the display. The first encounter was far from over, and Hale knew that whatever happened next would define humanity's place in the galaxy, for better or worse. The Veltharian was silent save for the erratic hum of its failing systems. Captain Zarvov gripped the edges of his command console, his knuckles pale. The human warship's second shot had left their vessel crippled, its bioluminescent hull flickering sporadically as if caught in its death throes. They've disabled our propulsion systems, Valorn stammered, his voice breaking the uneasy quiet. His crest dimmed, their usual glow a pale ghost of its former vibrancy. Shields are down to 30%. Zarvov forced his voice to remain steady, though his insides twisted with dread. Adros, status on weapon systems. The tactical officer's expression was grim. We have limited capabilities. Even if we fired everything we have, it wouldn't scratch their hull. A profound stillness filled the room, broken only by the ambient hum of the ship. Zarvov felt the weight of his crew's eyes on him. They were looking for answers, for leadership, for hope. But what could he give them when facing such overwhelming odds? This was a misunderstanding, Zarvov said at last, though he wasn't certain he believed it himself. They responded to the probe with force, and we failed to interpret their warning. They must see us as a threat. Valorn's voice trembled. Do they intend to destroy us, Captain? Zarvov met his gaze. Not if we can make them understand. He turned to the communications console, his hands moving with deliberate precision as he transmitted the Zerithian signal of surrender, a universal beacon of non-aggression, accompanied by a telepathic wave intended to evoke calm. The bridge crew held their breath as the signal left the Veltharian, reaching out toward the human warship like a plea in the dark. Across the void, the ISS Retribution bristled with latent energy, its weapons glowing faintly like embers awaiting ignition. On the command deck, Commander Marcus Hale stood motionless, his jaw set as he stared at the tactical display. Commander, Lieutenant Reed said cautiously, we're receiving a signal from the alien vessel. It's unusual, some kind of light pulse accompanied by an electromagnetic wave. Hale frowned. Can you interpret it? Drayton, the science officer, shook his head. Not fully, but the pattern suggests a message of submission, possibly a surrender. Colonel Carter's gruff voice cut through the room. Or it could be a ruse, a distraction while they prepare another attack. Hale's eyes narrowed, his instincts warring with logic. The alien vessel was clearly at their mercy, its systems barely functioning, its crew outmatched. Destroying them would ensure the safety of the Retribution and its mission. Yet something about their actions, tentative, almost desperate, gave him pause. Hold fire, Hale said finally, his voice firm. Carter turned to him, incredulous. Sir, with respect, they're still emitting an energy buildup. We can't assume it's harmless. And we can't assume it's hostile, Hale countered. They're trying to communicate. If we destroy them now, we could be wiping out a species that doesn't fully understand what it's up against. The command deck fell silent, the tension palpable. Hale turned back to the display, his decision weighing heavily on him. He had fought in countless battles, made choices that haunted him in the quiet hours of the night. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It was about what humanity would become in the face of the unknown. Send a response, Hale ordered. Lieutenant Reed hesitated. What kind of response, sir? Match their signal. Show them we're willing to communicate. Reed nodded and relayed the order. The ship systems emitting a pulse of light and energy designed to mimic the alien signal. The message traveled across the void, a tentative olive branch between two species on the brink of annihilation. On the Veltharion, the crew watched in stunned silence as the human warship responded. The energy pulse rippled across their failing systems, stabilizing some of the disruptions and easing the oppressive hum that had filled their minds. "They're responding," Valorn said, his voice filled with cautious hope. Zarvoth allowed himself a faint smile. Perhaps we are not so different after all. But the moment of relief was short-lived. A sudden, sharp tremor rocked the Veltharion, throwing several crew members to the floor. Zarvoth's eyes darted to the tactical display, where a new energy signature flared into existence. "Captain," Adros shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "Another vessel has entered the sector. It's massive." The holographic display shifted, revealing a third ship, a monstrous construct of jagged metal and seething energy. Its design was brutal, almost primal, and its weapons were already locking onto both the Veltharion and the Retribution. On the human warship, alarms blared as the new threat came into view. Hale's heart sank as he studied the vessel's design, its stark contrast to the sleek elegance of the alien ship they'd been facing. "Another hostile," Carter growled. "And this one doesn't look like it wants to talk." Hale straightened, his resolve hardening. "All hands, battle stations. Prioritize targeting on the new arrival." "Commander, what about the first ship?" Drayden asked. Hale hesitated, glancing at the display. The alien vessel was in no condition to fight, its systems barely functional. Yet it was still a wild card in this unfolding chaos. "We'll deal with them later," Hale said. "Right now, we've got a bigger problem." As the human warship pivoted to face the new threat, Zarvoth watched from the crippled Veltharion. He could feel the fear radiating from his crew, their collective minds grappling with the sudden shift in their circumstances. "Captain," Valorn said softly, "what do we do?" Zarvoth straightened, his amber eyes blazing with determination. "We survive, whatever it takes." He turned to Adros. "Redirect all remaining power to shields and propulsion. We may not be able to fight, but we can still evade." Adros nodded, his expression resolute. The crew moved with renewed purpose, their fear tempered by their captain's resolve. Across the void, the third vessel unleashed its first salvo, a barrage of energy bolts that lit up the darkness. The Retribution responded in kind, its cannons roaring to life. For a brief moment, the Veltharion drifted unnoticed, a fragile specter caught between titans. Zarvoth watched as the human warship engaged the new enemy, its movements calculated and precise. Perhaps, he thought, there was hope after all. And yet, as the battle raged on, one truth became painfully clear. This was only the beginning.